I remember standing outside that door, holding a plate of food I had prepared with my own hands. My daughter's engagement party was in full swing. There was music, there was laughter. There were people I had never met wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly pension. The house belonged to my future son-in-law's family, a big house, the kind of house that makes you feel small the moment you walk through the gate. I had driven 4 hours to get there. My old knees were hurting. My back was stiff from the road, but I didn't care. My daughter Amara was getting engaged, my baby girl, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest when she was 3 years old, the one who cried on my shoulder when she failed her first university exam, the one who worked 2 jobs to finish her degree while I could barely afford to buy her new shoes. I was so proud of her that night, and then I heard it. Just behind that half-open door, I heard my future son-in-law Derek laughing. Not a happy laugh, a cruel laugh, the kind of laugh that men use when they think no one important is listening. "Bro, honestly," he said, "marrying that plain Jane makes me want to puke." The plate in my hands went cold. "She's not even that cute," another voice said. "You could do so much better, D." I know, Derek said, still laughing. "But her old man is loaded. Trust me, once I'm in, I'm set for life. The girl is just the door. The money is what I'm walking through." More laughter. I stood there, alone, in the hallway of a house full of strangers, holding a plate of food nobody asked me to bring. Listening to the man my daughter loved with all her heart describe her like she was a transaction. And I made a decision in that moment. I did not drop the plate. I did not push open that door. I did not shout or cry or make a scene. I simply turned around, walked back to the party, put the plate on the table, and smiled at my daughter Amara when she came running over to hug me. "Daddy, you made your jollof rice," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Derek is going to love it." I looked at her face, that beautiful, honest, glowing face, and I said, "Yes, baby. Everything is going to be exactly as it should be, because I already had a plan. My name is Emanuel. I am 63 years old. I am not a dramatic man. I am not a vengeful man. I spent 35 years working as an accountant for a mid-sized logistics company. I was never the boss. I never drove a luxury car. I packed my own lunch every single day. My wife, Grace, passed away 9 years ago from an illness that came quickly and left a hole in our family that never fully closed. She was the loud one in our marriage, the one who laughed first and cried loudest and hugged the longest. When she died, the house went quiet in a way that no amount of time has ever fully fixed. I have 2 children. My son, Daniel, who is 31 and lives 3 hours away with his wife and 2 young boys. And my daughter Amara, who is 27, and who carries her mother's spirit in every single thing she does. Amara is not what the world calls flashy. She is not the kind of woman who walks into a room and makes every head turn. She has her mother's warm eyes and her father's quiet strength. She is the kind of person who remembers your birthday without being reminded, who brings soup when you are sick, who sat at my bedside for 3 days straight when I had my heart scare 2 years ago, holding my hand and telling me everything was going to be okay. She met Derek at work. He was charming, successful, well-dressed. He drove a nice car and spoke well and made her laugh. When she called me to say she had met someone, I could hear something in her voice I hadn't heard since her mother was alive. Hope, real, warm, glowing hope. I trusted that feeling. I trusted her judgment. I welcomed Derek into our family with open arms. What I did not know then was the thing I was about to learn. Derek came from money. His father owned 3 car dealerships across the state. His mother was on the board of some foundation and attended charity events, the way other people attend grocery stores, frequently and without much thought. From the beginning, there were small signs. The first time Derek came to my modest home for dinner, I saw his eyes move around the room in that way that people do when they are calculating value. He said all the right things. "What a cozy place, Mr. Emanuel. This is the best home-cooked meal I've had in years." But his eyes told a different story. His eyes were asking, "What is this worth?" My daughter could not see it. Love is a kind blindfold. I should tell you something important here, because it matters for the rest of this story. 3 years before Amara's engagement, my company was acquired. After 35 years of quiet, faithful service, I walked away with a retirement package that most people in my neighborhood would never see in 2 lifetimes. It was not flashy money, but it was significant money, carefully invested money, quietly growing money. I told no one except my lawyer and my accountant, not Daniel, not Amara, not any relative. I had learned from Grace's passing that money changes how people treat you. And I had spent enough years watching wealth destroy families that I wanted to keep my peace for as long as possible. But somehow, word had gotten out. I did not know how. Maybe a relative overheard a phone call. Maybe someone talked to someone who talked to someone else. But by the time Amara brought Derek home for the second time, he already seemed to know something. He was warmer, more attentive. He called me sir, with a little too much enthusiasm, I noticed. I said nothing, but now, standing in that hallway after hearing his words, her old man is loaded. Everything clicked into place like a lock finding its key. Derek was not marrying my daughter. He was robbing her. In slow motion, with a wedding ring. Let me paint you the picture of that night, because you need to understand how it felt to be me, walking back into that room. The engagement party was held at Derek's family home. His mother, Patricia, had organized everything. The decorations were extravagant. There were string lights and flower arrangements, and a photographer walking around capturing moments. There were perhaps 80 people there, most of them Derek's family and friends. People I had never met. My side of the family consisted of me, my son Daniel, his wife Kezia, and Amara's aunt, my late wife's sister, Auntie Rosa, who is 70 and treats every social event like a court appearance. We were not made to feel unwelcome exactly, but we were not made to feel at home either. Patricia had greeted me with the specific warmth of someone greeting a useful appliance. She was polite, she was efficient, she positioned Amara beautifully for photographs and spoke about the wedding plans in a way that made it clear she had already decided everything. Derek was charming all evening. He shook my hand. He said, "Sir, I promise I will take care of her." He toasted to the most amazing woman I've ever known, and Amara glowed. She absolutely glowed. I watched her from across the room, and my heart did 2 things at the same time. It swelled with love for her, and it broke quietly for what I now knew. My son Daniel came and stood beside me at one point. "You okay, Dad? You look like you're thinking too hard." "Just tired from the drive," I said. "You sure? You've had that look on your face." "What look?" Daniel studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Mom's look, the one she got when she knew something the rest of us didn't." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Go enjoy the party, son." He gave me one more long look, then walked away. That night, driving home in my old car, I thought carefully about what I had heard and what I was going to do about it. The foolish reaction would have been to confront Derek immediately, to cause a scene, to pull my daughter aside and say, "He's using you," because here is what happens when you do that. The daughter gets angry, the fiancé denies everything, and suddenly the father is the villain who tried to ruin the happiest moment of his child's life. I had seen this happen before. In my cousin's family, in my colleagues, the parent warns, the child doesn't listen. The wedding happens anyway, and now there is also a wall between parent and child that takes years to come down. No, I was not going to make that mistake. I was going to let Derek show himself. I was simply going to build the stage and let him perform. The first call I made the next morning was to my lawyer, a quiet, sharp woman named Mrs. O'Bira, who has handled my affairs for 11 years, and who has the energy of someone who has seen every kind of human foolishness, and is no longer surprised by any of it. I need to restructure some things. I told her. What kind of things? The kind that protect my daughter without her knowing she needs protection. There was a pause on the line. Tell me everything, she said. I told her about the engagement, about Derek's words, about the money he thought I had, and his plan to access it through my daughter. Mrs. O'Bira listened without interruption, which is one of the many things I appreciate about her. When I finished, she said, Emanuel, what exactly do you want to happen here? I want the truth to come out on its own, I said, and I want my daughter protected before it does. Then here is what we are going to do, she said. This is the part of the story where everything changes. 2 weeks after the engagement party, I called a family dinner. My home, just Daniel, Kezia, Amara, Derek, and Auntie Rosa. I cooked everything myself, the way I used to when Grace was alive. Jollof rice, fried plantain, pepper soup, the full spread. I wanted everyone comfortable. I wanted the atmosphere warm. After dinner, I stood up and cleared my throat. I want to share something with the family, I said. Since Amara and Derek are getting married, I feel it is time to be transparent about certain things. Amara looked at me with soft eyes. Derek looked at me with sharp ones. I want you all to know, I said, that I have been managing some finances over the past few years, and I have made a decision about what to do with those assets. I saw Derek sit up straighter. I have decided, I continued, to donate the majority of my retirement savings to a trust fund I have established in your mother's name, Grace Emanuel. This trust will fund education scholarships for underprivileged girls in our community. The rest will be divided between my children, but placed in protected accounts that can only be accessed under very specific conditions, overseen by my lawyer. I paused and looked at Derek directly. This means, I said calmly, that there is no large sum of money available to any spouse, in-law, or external party. What belongs to my children belongs to my children, not to anyone else. The room was quiet. Auntie Rosa nodded slowly like she understood exactly what was happening. Daniel looked at me with wide eyes. Amara looked confused but touched. Daddy, that's so beautiful for Mama's memory. But Derek's face went through 5 different expressions in 4 seconds. First surprise, then calculation, then a flash of something cold, then a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, then a composure that he had to visibly pull back over himself like a coat. That's very generous of you, sir, he said. Thank you, I said, and I looked at him steadily until he looked away. What I did not tell anyone at that dinner table was what Mrs. O'Bira and I had discovered during those 2 weeks of preparation. We had done some quiet research on Derek. What we found made my blood run cold. Derek was engaged 2 years before he met Amara, to a woman named Sylvia, whose father was a successful property developer. The engagement had ended suddenly, 6 months before the wedding. Sylvia's father had restructured his assets similarly to what I had just announced, and 2 weeks after that restructuring, Derek had ended the engagement. He had a pattern. He found women whose fathers had money. He charmed them. He got engaged. He positioned himself to benefit from a marriage. And when the money became unreachable, he disappeared. Mrs. O'Bira had spoken to Sylvia herself. Sylvia had cried on the phone. She told us she had blamed herself for 2 years. She thought she wasn't good enough. She thought she had done something wrong. She never knew that it had nothing to do with her. It had only ever been about her father's assets. I now had everything I needed, but I still waited, because I needed Derek to make the next move himself. He made it within 3 weeks. Derek began to pull away from Amara slowly, the way low tide pulls away from the shore. It was subtle at first. Canceled dinners, shorter phone calls, excuses about work. Amara started calling me in the evenings, her voice carrying that particular uncertainty that parents recognize instantly. "Dad, do you think Derek seems distant lately? What does your heart tell you, baby?" "I don't know, he just seems different. Has anything changed between you two?" A pause. "Not that I know of, but something feels off." I held the phone and closed my eyes. "Amara, I want you to know something." "What, Daddy?" "Whatever happens, you are the most valuable person in any room you walk into. Do you understand me? Not because of anything you own or wear, or who you are with, because of who you are." She was quiet for a moment. "You're scaring me, Dad." "Don't be scared. Just remember what I said." 3 days later, Derek asked to meet Amara for lunch. He broke off the engagement. She called me from the parking lot of the restaurant, crying so hard I could barely understand her words. I got in my car and drove the 4 hours without stopping. When I arrived, she was sitting on her apartment steps in the dark, still in the clothes she had worn to lunch, eyes red, a tissue in her fist. I sat down next to her on those steps, and I didn't say anything for a long time. I just put my arm around her, the way I used to when she was small. "He said he wasn't ready," she finally said. "He said he realized he needed to focus on himself. He said I deserved someone who was fully committed." I said. "He said it so calmly, Dad, like he'd been planning it, like it was a business meeting." "I know," I said. She turned to look at me, and in that moment, a daughter's instinct is a powerful thing. "You knew something," she said. "It was not a question. I know some things now," I said carefully, "and I think it is time I told you." We went inside. I made us both tea, and then I told her everything. I told her what I heard outside the door at the engagement party. I told her about the call to Mrs. O'Bira. I told her about the restructuring. I told her about Sylvia. I told her every single piece of what I had learned and done, calmly and completely, the way you tell your child a hard truth, with love holding every word steady. Amara sat across from me at her kitchen table and listened. She did not interrupt. She did not cry, not at first. She went very still, in the way that people go still, when the world is rearranging itself inside them. When I finished, the silence lasted a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "He was never there for me." "No," I said. "He wasn't. He held my hand and told me he loved me and looked me in the eyes and said he wanted to spend his life with me, and none of it was real." "No," I said. "None of it was?" Then she looked up at me. "But you were always there." And then she cried. Not the broken crying of the parking lot. Something different. Something that was grief and relief and love all at the same time. I held my daughter in her kitchen, and I thought about Grace. I thought about how much she would have handled this better than me. How she would have known what to say and said it louder. But I also thought, maybe, this time, my quietness was exactly what was needed. Now, I want to tell you the part of the story that Derek never saw coming. When Amara went back to work the following week, she found out that Derek had already, within 4 days of breaking the engagement, been seen at a company event with another woman. A woman whose family, according to Amara's colleague, was apparently very well off. It confirmed everything, but here is the twist that not even I fully expected. Word of what Derek had done traveled, as it always does in communities like ours. It reached his mother, Patricia. It reached his father. It reached the people who had attended that glittering engagement party. And it turned out I was not the first parent who had noticed something. Auntie Rosa, my late wife's sister, the woman who treats every event like a court appearance, had been quietly making phone calls for 3 weeks. She had spoken to Patricia directly. She had spoken to 2 of Derek's old university friends. She had gathered her own collection of information with the quiet precision of a woman who has lived 70 years and wasted none of them. Auntie Rosa called me on a Tuesday evening. "Emanuel," she said, "Patricia wants to speak with you." "About what?" "About her son. She found out what he said at the party. Someone told her, and she is not a happy woman." I said, "Rosa, I have no need for an apology from that family." "I know," she said, "but she has something she wants to tell you, and I think you should hear it." Patricia came to my home the following Saturday. She sat in my living room, this woman who had organized an extravagant engagement party and spoken about wedding plans like they were her personal project. And she sat with her hands clasped in her lap and her eyes tired. "Mr. Emanuel," she said, "I owe you and your daughter an apology that I do not know how to make large enough." "I'm listening," I said. "My son has a problem," she said. "I have known it for longer than I should have allowed it to continue. After Sylvia, I told myself it was simply immaturity, that he would grow out of it. But he didn't." She stopped, collected herself. "I am ashamed of who he has become, and I am ashamed that my home was the place where he said those things about your daughter." I looked at this woman for a moment. "Mrs. Patricia," I said, "I appreciate your honesty. I want you to know that my daughter is going to be perfectly fine. She has always been fine. It was your son who was never deserving of her." Patricia nodded slowly. "You're right," she said, "and I think somewhere some part of him knew that. Good people make people like Derek feel their own smallness, and that is what he could not stand." 3 months after the broken engagement, something happened that I did not plan. Derek called me. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me answer. His voice was different from any version I had heard before. No charm, no calculation, just a quiet, flat, uncomfortable voice. "Mr. Emanuel," he said, "I don't know why I'm calling. I wanted to say that I know what you did. Mrs. O'Bira told me about the trust, about the structure, about all of it." A pause. "And I know that you knew what I was doing." I said nothing. "I've been thinking," he continued, "about what I said at the party, about Amara, about all of it." Another long pause. "She was the realest person I've ever been around, and I didn't—" He stopped. "I don't really have a good thing to say after that." "No," I agreed. "You don't. I just wanted to, I don't know, tell you, Derek," I said calmly. "I'm going to say something to you, and I need you to really hear it. Not as Amara's father, just as one person speaking to another. Okay? You are not a stupid man. You are not even a cruel man by nature, I don't think. You are a man who decided somewhere along the way that people were instruments, that relationships were strategies, that love was a door you used to walk toward money." I paused. "And the only person that decision has truly destroyed is you. Not Amara, not Sylvia, you. Because you have gotten very good at being around warmth and feeling nothing." There was a long silence on the phone. "Yeah," he finally said, very quietly. "Yeah." I let him sit with that. "I hope," I said eventually, "that you find your way back to something real. I genuinely do. But that path does not go through my daughter, or any other man's daughter. It goes through yourself." I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a long time. Amara spent about 3 months healing. She went quiet for a while, the way people do when they are reassembling themselves. She visited me more often. We cooked together sometimes, like we used to when she was young. She would stand at the stove, and I would sit at the kitchen table, and we would just talk. About her mother, about memories, about who she wanted to be. My son Daniel came to visit too. He had pieced together most of what had happened, and he was angrier than Amara about it, in the way that older brothers often are. He wanted to do things I advised him not to do. I reminded him that his sister's peace was more valuable than his rage. "How are you so calm about this, Dad?" he asked me one evening, because I was calm at the moment that counted. I said, "If I had been angry then, things would have gone differently, and not better." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You're different from other dads, you know that. Your mother would disagree." I said. "She thought I was the most stubborn man alive." He laughed. And for a moment, Grace was in the room with us. The scholarship trust was formally established 4 months after the engagement party. We named it the Grace Emanuel Foundation for Girls' Education. At the inauguration ceremony, Amara stood up and spoke about her mother, about what education had meant in our family, about why this mattered. I watched her speak, and I saw her mother in her face, and I thought, this is who you are. This is what no one can take from you. 6 months after the broken engagement, Amara told me she had met someone, a quiet man from her church's community outreach group, a teacher, a man who brought her flowers that he grew himself and who spent his Saturdays volunteering at a boys' home. He's not fancy, Dad, she said, half laughing. Good, I said. He's kind, though, really, genuinely kind. That, I said, is everything. I want to speak to you now, not as Emanuel, the character in a story, but as someone who has thought carefully about what this whole experience taught, because it taught me things I did not expect to learn at 63. The first thing it taught me is this: silence is not weakness. Every instinct in my body on the night I heard those words wanted to react, to confront, to protect my daughter loudly and visibly. And if I had done that, I would have made a scene at a party, embarrassed my daughter on one of the most important nights of her life, and given Derek the ability to paint me as an unstable old man. While he continued to play his game, my silence was not surrender. My silence was strategy, and it protected my daughter far more than any outburst could have. The second thing is this: the love of a parent is not furniture. Derek looked at my daughter and saw a door to open. He looked at me and saw a bank account to access. He made the oldest mistake people make. He mistook a person for a resource. And in doing so, he missed the only things in that family that were actually valuable: the loyalty, the warmth, the genuine love that my daughter carried in her chest like a lamp. You cannot put a figure on that. And when you walk away from it, you feel the cold eventually. The third thing, and this is the one that keeps me awake sometimes, in the good way, is this: my daughter was never the plain Jane anyone needed to rescue or pity. She was the strongest person in that entire story. She loved openly, she trusted fully, she grieved honestly. And then she got back up. The man who mocked her, who laughed at her with his friends, who thought she was beneath him, that man is still searching for something real. And she has already found it, in herself first, and then in someone worthy of her. Derek and his friends laughed at my daughter. They thought they were the powerful ones in that room, but let me tell you something about power. Power is not the ability to laugh at people from behind closed doors. That is not power. That is fear. That is insecurity wearing a loud coat. Power is a 63-year-old man with aching knees standing in a hallway, hearing the worst possible thing, and choosing not to react, because he already understands that the real response will come later, on better ground, on terms that protect the person he loves. And at the end of this story, here is where everyone stands. Derek is searching. For what? I do not think he fully knows yet. I hope he finds it. Patricia carries a quiet shame that she is working, slowly, to earn her way out of. My daughter Amara is building something real. Her career, her foundation work, her new relationship with a kind man who sees her and chooses her every single day. My son, Daniel, is raising 2 boys who will one day hear this story and understand what kind of men I hope they become. And me, I am 63 years old. My back still hurts on cold days. I still drive my old car. I still pack my own lunch. But I sleep at night like a man who did right by his daughter. And that, more than any amount of money, more than any large house or expensive party, is a wealth that no one can restructure, protect, or take away. So the next time someone looks at the quiet person in the room, the humble father, the ordinary woman, the unflashy, unfancy, so-called plain Jane, and thinks, that one doesn't matter, remember this story, because sometimes the quietest person in the room has already thought 17 steps ahead. Sometimes the most powerful force in a family is not the one making the most noise. And sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who will, in the end, have the last word. Not by shouting, just by waiting, and by loving their child in a way that nothing and no one can touch. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or reminded you of someone you love, please give this video a like, share it with a parent or a daughter who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to this channel. We tell real human stories here, stories about love, dignity, family, and the quiet strength it takes to do the right thing. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and each other.